All right, the quiz explained. I know this one was kind of a doozy. Um, and you had been trained so much on a specific type of problem. And then this one wasn't really quite like how you had imagined this problem was going to be. So I do want to remind you that on the IB exam, these problems that you're going to get are going to be ones that you've never seen before, and that is okay. You just need to use what you already know in a way that's a completely new situation. So I had a lot of you message me and say, I don't have enough information to find K. And you're totally right. You do not have enough information to find K. So put down the information that you do have and see how can it all work together. So with that, let's start the problem. The intensity of a sound wave varies inversely with the square of the distance. So the intensity, pencil doesn't work, intensity varies inversely. So there's a K up top here with the square of the distance. You are standing away from it, meaning that the more intense a sound is, the more intense it is, the smaller the distance is, right? Which makes sense. The closer you get to somebody, the louder they are, versus the further away you get from somebody, the softer they are. So the intensity here gets bigger as this number gets smaller. I equals intensity and D equals distance. K is a big fat question mark, and it ends up staying a question mark this whole time. We don't need to know what K is. We just know that K will stay the same. So it says, given that you're initially standing 25 meters away, and then you move such that you are 25, and then move such that you are 50 meters away, find the factor. Keep in mind that the word factor means like divide or multiply, right? The word factor always means divide or multiply, by which the intensity of the sound has increased. So you probably all got to this point and you're like, I don't have any intensity, which means I can't find my K, which is hard. You only have distance. You have two separate distances, so you have enough to make two separate equations plugging in for that D guy. So then we've got one of the intensities, I sub A, because the first intensity, equals K over, and then that'll be 25 squared. And then we have I sub B equals K over 50 squared. Now I put the subscript in here because I wanted to make it clear that the intensity here is different than the intensity here, right? I'm further away here, which means my intensity here is going to be smaller. And here my intensity is going to be bigger because I'm closer, right? Now the K here and the K here do not have a subscript because they are the same. It's the constant, right? It's this number that makes up this equation. So the K here and the K here are the same, but the intensities here are different because these distances are different. Now it says that you started out with this distance and then you moved to this distance, and it said by what factor? So multiplying this guy by something, how did I get to here, right? By what factor did the intensity of the sound decrease? So how much did I multiply this guy by in order to get to my new intensity, right? My first intensity was multiplied by something such that it gave me my new intensity. So, well, how do I solve for an unknown here? Well, I multiply both sides by the reciprocal of this fraction, or in other words, I divide this fraction. So question mark is going to be K over 50 squared divided by K over 25 squared. What do you do when you divide fractions? You keep the first one, you multiply to a fraction, or change it to a multiplication, and then you flip the second fraction. And notice that what happens is that the K here and the K here cancel out. And now we're just left with numbers. That is what we're hoping for when we have a variable that stays the same. We're hoping that at some point we're going to manipulate it such that it cancels out. Now you can put this into your calculator, or you can realize that 25 squared over 50 squared is 25 squared over 25 squared times 2 squared. If that doesn't make sense, don't worry about it. But if it does make sense, realize that you can do this kind of smarter and not harder, because these guys cancel out, and that becomes 1 over 4. So the intensity decreases by a factor of a fourth. And then moving on to the next problem, it's going to be very similar. You then move from 50 meters away, right? So you have, let's call this I sub B, where it was K over 50 squared, to only 40 meters away. I sub C equals K over 40 squared. Determine how the intensity has changed on this occasion. We're doing the exact same thing. We started with this intensity. We multiplied it by an unknown, and we get a new intensity. So to figure out what this guy is, my question mark ends up being K over 40 squared times 50 squared over K. These guys cancel out, and I'm going to plug this guy into my calculator. I get 25 over 16. So it's the intensity has increased because that's 1.5625. So it's increased, but not by a whole lot, just by about, it increased by about 56%, right? That whole number, that whole 1 is 100%, which means it stays the same. So if you have more than 100%, right, 1.56 is more than 100%, it's 156%. So it's increased by 56%. Or increased by a factor of 1.56. So again, not something we necessarily been trained on doing, which is what the IB is about, right? It's about getting brand new problems and what can you piece together. I had so many of you tell me, I don't have enough information for K. What do I do? Follow that instinct. You don't have enough information for K. What else can you do? Where are the patterns? What is the same? What is not the same, right? Think about it logically and try and think about the numbers and the words that and how they're all playing together and see how you can figure this out. Okay, you've got this.